Broken, rebuilt, war, power, comeback. They didn't just leave, they shattered you and watched from a distance. They whispered your failure before you even hit the floor. But here's the thing, you didn't stay broken. You bled. In silence, you hurt. In pieces, you disappeared. Not to hide, but to build. And what you built wasn't soft, wasn't safe, wasn't the version of you they thought they destroyed. You became precise, focused, quiet. And in that quiet, you trained. You studied your pain until it turned into a pattern. You studied yourself until you became unreadable. They thought your silence was surrender. It wasn't. It was strategy. You didn't rise to be seen. You rose to be untouchable. And now, you don't speak for revenge. You move for redemption, and that movement terrifies them. They thought breaking you meant you'd never return. They didn't know you were rebuilding with rage, not loud, not messy, disciplined, deliberate. You stopped explaining your pain, started learning from it. Every betrayal became a blueprint. Every scar became structure. Every silence became steel. They thought you'd beg, but you planned. They thought you'd break, but you adapted. They thought you'd drown, but you learned to breathe underwater. Now you show up without noise, without need, without the softness they once exploited. You don't scream anymore, you stare, and that stare says everything. You don't seek closure, you became closure. You don't chase peace, you carry it now. And it's heavy, because it's built on everything they tried to bury you with. But you rose, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. You came back, but you weren't the same. They expected healing, they got heat. They expected softness, they met silence. Because healing didn't turn you into a saint, it turned you into a soldier. You didn't patch your wounds with hope, you reinforced them with strategy, with boundaries, with discipline. You stopped asking why they left. You started asking why you ever allowed them close. Now your standards are weapons. Your space, sacred. Your peace, protected like territory. You don't fight the same anymore. You fight with stillness, with timing, with presence. They see your eyes and realize this isn't a comeback. This is a transformation. You weren't rebuilding to be liked. You were rebuilding so no one could break you in the same place twice. You no longer explain the pain. You execute the lesson. You no longer relive the past. You reprogram your future. And what you're building now can't be broken, because this version of you was designed for war. If you're still watching, you're not like them. Hit subscribe and ring the bell. You belong here. They left you in pieces, but they didn't expect you to count every piece, to study every crack, to build stronger than before. You didn't come back to prove anything. You came back because staying down was never your destiny. They tried to erase your fire, but you turned cold, not numb, calculated. You don't react now. You analyze. You don't swing first. You wait for the mistake. And when it comes, you finish it clean. Your silence isn't absence, it's anticipation. Your stillness, precision. You know who you are now, what you carry, what you survived, and what you'll never allow again. They wanted to see a version of you that needed them. Instead, they witnessed the version that fears nothing. You came back armored, mind right, heart locked, vision brutal. Because when peace becomes your priority, anything that threatens it becomes the enemy. You didn't rise to be noticed. You rose to never be broken again. You didn't heal to impress them. You healed to outgrow them. Every step since the fall has been intentional. Every wall you built meant fewer doors to betrayal. You no longer live for second chances. You live for standards, for boundaries, for clarity. You don't need apologies. You need distance. You don't need closure. You need consistency. Because now, you're done fixing what didn't break you. You're done repairing connections that didn't survive truth. You don't seek revenge. You seek dominance. Dominance over your reactions, your urges, your habits. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're trying to become untouchable. And in that mission, you've already succeeded. They left thinking you'd crumble, but they gave you the perfect reason to never bend again. And now your silence echoes louder than any version of you that ever explained. You don't speak much now, because what you're building doesn't need an announcement. It needs execution. They used to read your face, now they read your absence. They used to predict your moves, now they flinch at your stillness. You became unreadable, unreachable, and that's what scares them. Because when you stopped reacting, you started rewriting your life, your rules, your reality. You're not looking for validation. You're looking for victory. Quiet victory. Personal victory. And every win is built on silence, on boundaries, on distance from everything that once broke you. They wanted weakness. You gave them warning. They wanted noise. You gave them stillness. And in that stillness, you planned a future so far above them, they won't even recognize your name when they hear it next. Because you're not just healed, you're dangerous. Dangerous in focus, dangerous in silence, dangerous because nothing outside you controls you anymore. They thought breaking you would define you, but it refined you. You didn't just rebuild, you redesigned your heart, your mind, your limits. And what came back wasn't the version they knew. It was sharper, quieter, and fully self-made. You stopped seeking comfort, started seeking control of your time, your energy, your future. Now you don't explain your peace. You protect it. You don't justify your boundaries. You enforce them. You're not angry anymore. You're aligned. You're not loud. You're lethal. Because you realized War isn't always fire and noise. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's walking past what once broke you like it never existed. And that scares them, because nothing's more dangerous than someone who came back without the need to prove anything. You didn't return for revenge. You returned because silence was never the end. It was the beginning of dominance. You didn't break. You paused. You didn't fall. You recalibrated. And now, you don't return to prove. You return to dominate. You stopped explaining, stopped warning. You just became the consequence. Every scar, documentation, every silence, preparation, every distance, design. Because this version of you doesn't beg, it builds, doesn't chase, it claims. You used to want them to understand. Now you want nothing. Not validation, not closure, not even recognition. Because when you came back, you weren't looking for applause, you were looking for ownership. And now you own yourself, fully, finally, fiercely. So let me ask you this: what version of you had to die so this version could come back built for war?